Emily, is it okay to record this session?
The recording is fine if you'd like to. That's fine.
Very good. Okay, go ahead.
No worries. Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll get straight into it. So, the Bimini Shark Lab is based in Bimini in the Bahamas. So we're not super far from the US. We're actually closer to the US than we are to any other islands within the Bahamas. In Bimini, it's quite close to Miami. But I'll cover that in a second. So we'll get into it. A little bit more about me. So my name is Emily. If you guys have forgotten already, I'd forgive you if you have. I am from Melbourne in Australia. So if you guys were thinking maybe I have a bit of an accent, if I'm a little bit hard to understand at times, I apologize. So I'm from Melbourne, which is right down the bottom of Australia. I spent my whole life there before I went traveling recently and ended up here. I was super, super lucky, and I actually was growing up around animals my entire life. So both my parents are zookeepers. So this meant that we were able to keep lots of animals at home and go into work with them and see all these amazing animals and handle them and pat them. And it was super, super cool. I loved it. So since I was very, very young, I always knew I wanted to work with animals, but I wasn't sure exactly which path that was going to take me down and which specific animals that was going to be. But I also love to travel. And so travel was something I always wanted to be a really big part of my life. I wanted to find a career that would allow me to do something I love while seeing new places all the time. And so luckily enough, I'm over here in the Bahamas, which is the whole other side of the world from Australia. So that's something I've managed to do, which is awesome. And something else about me, I actually used to be quite afraid of sharks. And so I'm sure a few of you, or maybe all of you, can relate to this. But it was quite scary when I would go for a swim in the ocean when I was younger, and I was always, looking out. And we have a lot of white sharks where I'm from at home, so it was quite a bit unnerving. But I have this really specific memory when I was younger, in the water with my family, and I saw this huge fin kind of just behind the waves, and I freaked out and I ran out of the water and I was like, shark, shark, everyone get out, like telling my brothers to leave the water. And then they all started laughing at me because they were like, Emily, it's dolphins, calm down, like go swim with the dolphins, that would be amazing. And I was like, absolutely not, I'm staying dry for the rest of the afternoon, no thank you. But so that kind of started to change when I found out a little bit more about sharks. So I watched a documentary when I was about 15, that really just opened my eyes to the threats facing sharks, and also that I just got to see a very different side to them than I had been shown in the media previously. It was all shark attacks and sharks are the enemy and everything like that. So seeing something that was just quite different, it was just them peacefully swimming with people around, and there were, different types of sharks that don't all have pointy, scary teeth. It really just opened my eyes, and then it sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole and just learning everything I could about sharks, and really got me to where I am today. After a traveling stint last year, after COVID lockdowns finally lifted and we were able to leave the country again, I went traveling and I ended up here in the Bahamas as an intern. So I started my internship in September last year. That's something we do a lot here at the Bimini Shark Lab, is offer internships. And so I have stayed on, and now I am the outreach coordinator. So I do a lot of these presentations and do a lot of outreach events for people. I also host tours and coordinate outreach events and other educational opportunities as much as I can to really just get the word out there as much as we can about sharks. And so a little bit more about the Shark Lab. So we have 3 mission goals or mission statements. So research, we aim to understand as much as we can about sharks and their relatives and the roles that they play within their ecosystems and how we can maintain that. Education, we aim to educate both scientists as well as the wider public. All this research is great, but it doesn't really do anything if we just keep it all to ourselves. So we really try and spread the message about sharks and the threats facing them, and how wonderful they are and why we need them in the ocean. And both of these goals are ultimately to conserve species. So I don't know if you guys know too much about sharks, but a lot of species are quite endangered. And so basically we are trying to do everything we can to ensure that these shark species stick around and people get to see them for generations to come. So this is just a fun little video for you guys. It just kind of highlights what life looks like here at the Shark Lab and some of our research, our education and things like that. So I'll let this play for you.
It is a video, but on the Zoom, it's kind of a little bit slow. I think this video probably is on their website. I will play this video again for you. Osha. Yeah, because-
Cool. So that's a cool little video that just kind of shows what life is like much better than I could explain to you. Cool. So zooming in, where are we? So I mentioned to you guys that I am in Bimini in the Bahamas. So we are the Bimini Shark Lab. And Bimini is actually only 50 miles from Miami. So we're actually closer to Florida than we are to any other islands in the Bahamas. And we are quite uniquely placed. So you can see there's two very different colors of blue-green in that photo there. So Bimini is right on the edge of what we call the Great Bahama Bank. And this is that kind of lighter greeny blue color that you can see on the map there. And that's what that means is it's just a shallow kind of sandy seagrass habitat that's all around the Bahamas. But we're also right on the edge of the Gulf Stream, and that's that much deeper blue water there separating us from America. And being on the edge of these two environments really allows for a range of habitats and different species to thrive. So the shallow sandy seagrass area provides that shallow kind of nutrient, not so nutrient rich water, but the Gulf Stream is super rich in nutrients. There's a really deep upwelling of warm water. And so having that mix of both habitats really allows a lot of species to thrive here. So we get quite a few different species of sharks as well as many other marine species as well. And so Bimini is made up of two islands, North Bimini and South Bimini. There's quite a big lagoon in the middle, and it's just separated by a very small channel. It's just like a 2-minute ferry ride, so it's super tiny island. North Bimini is a lot more developed. It's where all the hotels and stuff are. It's where the cruise ships come in. There's a lot more hotels and shops and very touristy. Whereas South Bimini, which is where the Shark Lab is, it's a lot more nature focused. It's very quiet. There's very few people here, and there's a lot more mangroves and trees and wildlife, which is what we like to see. And so this is what the Shark Lab looks like. So this is our remote field station. And so it's very little, but we've got quite a lot of water access. So as you can see, we've got our own dock there. So we've got access to our boats, but we've also got a beach just behind us there on the other side where we're often lucky enough to see little baby lemon sharks swimming around, or sometimes bigger sharks like great hammerheads or bull sharks have been seen on the deeper side of that beach as well. So it's super cool to live in such a great place. And so the Shark Lab was founded in 1990 by Dr. Samuel Gruber. And Dr. Gruber had been working with the University of Miami, and he'd been working with lemon sharks. So that was his study species. And he'd actually been coming to Bimini for many years before this. But what he found is that there was a very abundant population of juvenile lemon sharks, which was his study species here in Bimini. And so what he wanted to do is he wanted to establish a permanent residence, a permanent research station, so that he could study these lemon sharks in their natural habitat year round, as opposed to relying on boats to get across the Gulf Stream to come to Bimini, and scheduling and weather and things like that. It's also very different studying wild sharks in their natural habitat as compared to a lab environment as he had been in Miami. And so that's why he wanted to establish this, and we've been running for almost 35 years now. And so we are a nonprofit organization. We are a charity. We run on funding and grants and scientific grants and things like that. So it's definitely not for profit. We do it because we love it and not for the money. And in our almost 35 years of running, we've put out over 150 scientific publications, so peer-reviewed publications and papers. We've also been involved in over 200 documentary productions. So if any of you guys have seen Shark Week, we have appeared on Shark Week. It's what most people think of, but many other productions around the world that have been produced here in the Shark Lab. And so I'm going to ask you guys some questions here. So if I ask you what is a shark, or what do you think about sharks? What are some feelings that you associate with sharks? What do you think of them? If I can get maybe Salim's help here to just get a few people to give me an answer of what you think of when you see what is a shark. And you'll have to be quite loud so I can hear you over the microphone. Oh, it's a little bit hard to hear. Maybe if you guys come up and stand a little bit closer to the microphone, if you've got an answer.
Hold on, I'll get this.
Oh.
Okay, say your answer.
Shark is like a fish that has gills and usually in water.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. Sharks are fish and they have gills. Perfect.
Go ahead.
I know that they have to be swimming to use their gills.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely some sharks do have to keep moving to breathe. Absolutely.
So I also know that they have really big teeth and they use it to attack or eat their prey.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
Bridget?
I know that sharks are very intelligent and I honestly think they're a fascinating species.
Amazing. I
Okay.
love that.
Mason?
Sharks don't have bones, but they have like cartilage instead.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you guys know heaps.
that's the most important thing, right? Sharks don't have bones, it has cartilage. What is also one more fun fact about sharks' teeth? Yes. Yeah.
Sharks' teeth are 2 layers, I think.
Yeah, 2 layers or we get
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they're constantly regrowing teeth and they're having them pull out, which is why you see so many shark teeth around beaches and things like that.
any other fun facts about shark? Yes.
Only 2% of the species actually bite humans.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's very, very few species that really interact with humans. That is an awesome fact.
Yeah, and it's all because of Steven Spielberg, okay? Who ruined, everybody's opinion about sharks.
Definitely. Oh, that's
Steven
awesome. You guys had some great answers there. Cool. So you guys are actually super helpful. You really covered a lot of area there. And so what I find when I ask this question is a lot of people do have quite negative associations with sharks. So things like big teeth and scary and they eat people and apex predators. And of course there are the scientific things like they are a fish and they have to keep swimming to breathe. Definitely things like that. But of course they are super, super fascinating as well. So you guys covered really a lot there, which is awesome. And so when someone asks me what I think about sharks, I think they're awesome. They're the best. You don't need to know any more than that. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll feel a little bit the same. And so when people think of sharks, they usually think of things like this. So these are our typical, what we call our sharky looking sharks. It's what the media shows the most. It's these very typical kind of scary, big looking sharks with those big dorsal fin, big mouths and pointy snouts. Especially this one, the great white, is what most people think of. Exactly. Thank you to Steven Spielberg and creating that Jaws movie there. So a lot of perceptions have been based on that and that big scary white shark, which isn't the case for many, many sharks, but it is what comes to mind for most people when they think of sharks. So I'm going to get you guys to help me again here, and we're going to label this shark, just some basic things that all sharks have. So what are some things you can see here or you know about sharks and just their anatomy?
I have a fin.
A fin? Yeah, definitely. Sharks have lots of fins, certainly. Anything else you guys can see?
It's a great hammerhead.
Oh, that one is a great hammerhead. Yes, well done. You can see, yeah, that kind of wing shape on its head there. Awesome. Anything else you guys can see that are on the body of the shark? I see a couple hands. Awesome.
Gills, literally, they need them to breathe, and without breathe, you're literally not alive.
Exactly. Yep, awesome. All sharks have gills. Most sharks will have 5, some have 6 or 7.
They have, so what, by looking at this, the first thing that comes into my mind is like, wow, that's a lot of fins.
It is. Yeah, sharks have a lot of fins. They need to move through the water, and these fins help them to do that. Definitely.
I noticed that on the tail, there's this little triangle at the tip.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So every shark will have a slightly different shape of tail, but yeah, for the hammerhead, they do have a little notch out the front, and that is just to help them move through the water, and it's helps them to be quite agile when they are chasing down prey.
Okay.
Cool. All right, there's some good answers there. So I'll go with the obvious to start ones. The obvious ones to start. So all sharks have mouths, obviously, like us. They need their mouths to eat food. Without food, they would die. So that's very, very important. Sharks have eyes. They need to see in the water. They need to look for prey and other things and threats to them. And so they need to look around. So all sharks have eyes. Of course, this one's mentioned. Sharks have gills. So most sharks will have 5 gill slits. But there are a few species. They're called the 6 gills or 7 gills. And that is just exactly the number of gills they have. So not as many of them, but there are a few that have more than 5 gills. And then, of course, we get to the fins. So there's lots of fins. So sharks have 2 dorsal fins, the first dorsal fin and the second dorsal fin. And these can vary in size and where they are placed on the shark's body as well throughout the species. They have a caudal fin or their tail fin. So we have an upper caudal fin and a lower caudal fin with a little fork in the middle there. Then we have pectoral fins. So this is kind of what you would compare to arms, I guess. They're up the front of the body, helping them move through the water. They also have a pelvic fin and their anal fin. So sharks are full of fins, and this just really helps them to navigate the water and move around easily. Cool. And so sharks are, you guys mentioned it already, but sharks are made of cartilage. So they're very different to bony fish, which is every other shark in the ocean, which makes them quite special. And some other cartilaginous fish or some relatives of sharks include the raisin skates and our chimeras. So chimeras are kind of a deep sea fish that are very closely related to sharks. They're also sometimes called ghost sharks, but they're not quite a shark, but they are very, very closely related, and they're also made of cartilage. And then the raisin skates are they're very, very closely related, almost cousins to sharks as well. And these guys are all what we refer to as cartilaginous fish. And so just like our noses and our ears, if you guys wiggle them and you can kind of move them a little bit more than you could the bones in your body, so that allows them to move a lot freely through the water. And so there's actually over 500 different species of sharks, and that's not even including chimeras or raisin skates. There's actually over 1,200 species of cartilaginous fish, but if we're just looking at the sharks, there's over 500 species that we know of that have been described. So that's quite a lot, and that leads to a lot of diversity within these as well. So here in Bimini, we get quite a few species of sharks. So we get bull sharks here in Bimini. We also get the great hammerhead. So this is why a lot of people do come to Bimini. They come specifically to dive with these great hammerheads. We get Caribbean reef sharks, which we can see around the coral reefs here in Bimini. We get tiger sharks. Now, these are my personal favorite. We can't reliably see them, but they do show up every now and then, which is super, super fun. Black tip sharks, which are awesome. They hang out they forage over the seagrass areas. Of course, we get our lemon sharks. So this is what Doc Gruber was doing most of his research on, and we've made it sort of our model species here at the Shark Lab because we do have the most data on them over the years. And so these ones are all pretty typical sharky looking sharks. Like I mentioned before, it's what a lot of people think of. We also get nurse sharks here in Bimini in the Bahamas. And so these ones are found all over Bimini in a range of sizes, kind of from any age, but they also look a little bit different. And so these ones, you guys might notice they're chilling on the bottom of the sea. So that these guys will actually sit very still for a lot of their time. They're quite lazy sharks. We like to poke fun of them a fair bit, but they'll actually just sit and they'll rest under ledges and things where they'll look for lobster and conch as well. And so while I'm here, I'll just quickly mention, we did touch on it before, that a lot of sharks do have to continue moving to breathe. And so this is what some sharks, it's what we refer to as ram ventilation, where they can't push water over their gills themselves, so they have to keep moving for it. But some sharks are actually able to rest on the bottom and sit still. And so they can do that by buccal pumping, which is basically, you guys can do it with me, but it's just kind of sucking water in through their mouths and kind of pushing it over their gills. And so some sharks are lucky enough to do that. So like the nurse shark here, for example, tiger sharks are able to do both of those as well. So they can use ram ventilation when they are swimming through the water. But if they want to have a little rest and kind of just sit there and suck water over their gills as well, they also have that option. So not all sharks have that option. Definitely some do need to continue moving all the time, but that's just a cool little fun fact that some are able to kind of have a little bit of a rest when they want it. And so these are some other species of sharks that we find around the world. And so they all look pretty different to some of the ones that we've seen already. Does anyone recognize any of these, or do they think they could have a guess at maybe what some of these species might be? See a few hands, that's awesome.
There's a weblong.
Yes, a wobbegong shark, awesome. You're the second student ever to know what that is. That's great.
I think there might be a cookie cutter shark. I don't know. I can't quite tell.
Yeah, it is. Definitely, you nailed it. That's super, super hard to tell. So well done. That is a cookie cutter shark on the bottom there. What
Which
about
one is the one, the right side one or the left side one?
Well, like a shark eel.
the walking shark?
No, no, the cookie cutter shark. Which one is
Oh,
it?
Oh, the cookie cutter shark is the one surrounded by black. It's a deep sea
Oh.
shark, so it's
Oh.
very, very hard to get pictures of. So it's just surrounded by darkness.
We have enough. Cool.
Beautiful. Great. Well, well done, guys. That's awesome. So yeah, we've got the wobbegong shark there with the little tassels around its mouth. And these ones are kind of an ambush predator. They'll sit and they'll camouflage on the sea floor. And then when a fish comes along that they see, they'll just quickly suck it up and snap it out of the air. The cookie cutter shark, these are another one of my personal favorites. I think just their whole existence is hilarious. And so how they eat, you guys, some of you might already know about it, but how they eat is they'll actually sneak up on very, very large animals. So things like tuna and dolphin and other larger sharks. And they'll sneak up on them and just take a really quick bite and then swim off. So you'll see a lot of these animals that will just have almost a perfect circle, like someone's taken a melon baller out of them, and it is these cookie cutter sharks just sneaking up on much larger predators that could even just use them as a snack, taking a chunk and just swimming off. So it's very, very cheeky, but I think it's a very clever way to get your meals. So the other two here, we have that yellow spotty shark. That one is an epaulet shark. They're sometimes called walking sharks. And this is because these guys are super, super clever. So they'll actually, they're found mostly in tidal pools around the Pacific Ocean. So around Australia, we get a lot of these. And when that tide goes out, some of these guys can get a little bit stranded when the water gets lower. And so they'll actually use their fins to walk along the coral reef. They'll just kind of shuffle along using their paddle-like fins, and they can walk along the reef until they get back to the water, which is super, super cool. So there's about 9 different species of these walking sharks. And then the one below that, the one that just straight up looks like an alien, there's no other way to describe it, that one is called a frilled shark. So these ones are kind of spooky looking, I think, but they're quite a deep sea shark as well, so one that we would never really come into contact with. And this is one of those few species that does have 6 gills instead of 5. So there's, yeah, a lot of diversity there. So all of these sharks live in very different habitats, and different habitats need different adaptations in order to survive. And that leaves us with very crazy looking sharks. And so sharks have adapted to live in pretty much every marine environment, but we have some pretty basic ways that we segment sharks. So we have our pelagic species. And so just like the thresher shark here, these ones, they spend a lot of time out in the open ocean. They are very migratory species. So they travel very large distances throughout their lives in order to find food and shelter. We have our coastal species, so like the lemon shark here in Bimini. These ones spend a lot more time much closer to shore and in shallower waters, and they have a much smaller home range. And then we have our deep sea species. So these are the ones that humans don't really ever come into contact with. They're very deep for us. So we would really only find them through things like submarine footage and using submarines to go down and explore. Also deep sea fishing as well. And so these ones can be very, very large, like the Greenland shark, for example, or they can be super, super tiny, like the lantern shark that we've got here. And what else is really cool about these deep sea species is a lot of them can actually display bioluminescence. So they can produce their own light down in the deep, dark sea, which is super, super fascinating. And they can be found anywhere from the beautiful warm tropical reefs all the way up to the freezing ice waters of the Arctic. Cool. And so we'll dive into a little bit more about the lemon shark, the model species here at the Shark Lab. And so lemon sharks, the scientific name for lemon shark is Negaprion brevirostris. And so I know scientific names always seemed very, very scary to me when I was younger. I was like, oh my gosh, how do people remember these? What does that mean? It's just kind of a little bit of gibberish. But when you do come to understand them, it's actually quite fascinating. So Negaprion brevirostris, it actually just means, so Negaprion means non-serrated, brevirostris means short snout. So this is a shark that has a non-serrated teeth and a short snout. That's all that means. And it's just a way for scientists to know exactly which species we are talking about. So when life gave us lemons, we decided to study them. And so Lemon sharks do actually get their name because of their yellow coloration. So scientists generally don't like to classify sharks based on their color because it does vary so much. So sharks can actually tan, which is super cool. So a lot of the sharks that we see here, if we're in the water with 10 different nurse sharks, these are all going to be slightly different colors. Some of them are going to be super, super light, while some others are going to be super, super dark. So we do try and steer clear of naming sharks because of their color, but with lemon sharks, they do have a very distinctive yellow hue to them, which is how they got their name. And so lemon sharks do live in the mangroves for the first roughly 7 years of their life, and they'll use that for protection from predators. So a lot of the bigger animals that would eat a baby lemon shark, they can't get up into the mangroves, so it's great habitat for them to grow. And they can also actually learn to just become a shark. They learn how to hunt and how to survive here as a lemon shark, and they'll actually learn from older lemon sharks that are sharing that nursery with them as well. So they do learn from each other. So one of you already mentioned it as well. They are very, very intelligent, and they often don't get a lot of credit for that. They're kind of seen as mindless fish-eating things, but they're not. They do have quite intelligent. Cool. And they also eat fish, they eat crabs and snails when they are quite little. And then as they grow up and get a lot bigger, they'll actually even eat smaller sharks. So a lot of shark species can be cannibalistic, and lemon sharks are one of these species. So a fully grown lemon shark, if it comes across a baby lemon shark that's not in those mangroves, it might turn around and eat it as a snack. So that is something else that's quite interesting about this species as well. And so one of the biggest projects that we've done with lemon sharks here at the Shark Lab is the Pit Project. And so this was done for almost 30 years, every year for almost 30 years. And it was done in these 2 nursery areas where there was many, many baby lemon sharks. And so what we would do is we would go out and we would aim to catch every newborn from that year. So we would go out with nets, and every shark that we catch, we would sample them, we would weigh them, we would measure them, take a little fin clip for DNA analysis and things like that. And so we would get a lot of data from this Pit Project. And so every time we caught a shark, we would actually put it in a temporary pen in that nursery area. And this just meant that we weren't catching the same shark over and over again, putting it through unnecessary stress. And then at the end of that Pit Project, when we were confident we'd caught all of the sharks from that year, we would just open up the pens again, and they'd never left their nursery, and they were free to swim around again. So very, very ethical. Don't want you guys to worry about that. But we were able to get heaps of data from these guys, and it's called the Pit Project because every shark that we would catch, we would insert a pit tag. And so do you guys have pets, maybe cats and dogs? Put your hand up if you've got a pet cat or a dog. Awesome. And these guys have microchips, I'm sure. And so they've got just something tiny that's implanted usually around their neck if it's a cat or a dog. And this is basically just a microchip for sharks. So we can scan a shark that we've caught, and we can see if it has a pit tag. And if it does, it's going to have a very unique identifying number. And this just means that we're able to look back in our database and see if we've caught that shark before, and maybe how big it was when we caught it, where we caught it, and then how big it is now, and if it's traveled very far. We're able to get a lot of data from this. And so one of the things that we found from this project is that lemon sharks display natal phylopatry. And so natal phylopatry, it might sound like a big scary term, but I'm sure you've actually heard of the idea before. So very similar to salmon returning to the same river systems where they were born, and turtles going to the same stretch of beach to lay their eggs. Lemon sharks will actually return to the same patch of mangroves where they grew up to drop their pups. And so lemon sharks, they get pregnant roughly every 2 years. And so every 2 years, these mothers will come back and drop their pups in the same area, because they know that the nursery where they grew up, it obviously provided great shelter, great protection from predators, and it was a really great place for them to grow up. So it would probably be a great place for their pups to grow up. So that's super, super interesting that they do have that connection to a very specific place. And so sharks also have very different modes of reproduction. So I want you guys to have a quick look at this photo. You can actually see an umbilical cord is still attached to this little baby lemon shark. And so some sharks do give live birth. So like the lemon shark, for example, some sharks lay eggs. Some sharks will create eggs in the womb, and then those babies will hatch, and then they'll actually give live birth. So it's a little bit of both. Some will eat their brothers and sisters in the womb. Pretty much any way you can think of, a shark will have that mode of reproduction. There's so many, heaps of variation within shark species. But these lemon sharks, when they're born, they actually do have a little umbilical scar. So very similar to your belly button, you can actually see where that cord was attached, although this will heal just within a few weeks. So they don't have it for very long, but it's pretty cute when you do get to see these tiny ones. And so this is just a quick video. I'm gonna be quiet for a minute and let you guys watch it, but this is what it looks like when we do have a shark by the boat and what a shark workup looks like. So that's just a pretty smooth example of what it looks like when we do have a shark by the boat there. And so there's a lot of things going on all at once. I'm sure you guys didn't catch everything that was happening there, but what you can see is people leaning over each other. There's not a lot of personal space on the boats when you are working with sharks, but just something to keep in mind if you are thinking about going into it as a career. And so one of the things that we do when we have a shark is we will tag it. And so we have a few different methods of tagging. And one of these is a dart tag or a spaghetti tag, just because it looks like a thin piece of spaghetti. We're very creative in the naming things, us scientists. This is just an external tag that usually sits just below the dorsal fin. So you can see it on one of the lemon sharks there, just trailing beside the dorsal fin. And again, these will have a unique identifying number, and this just means that maybe if a fisherman catches it in the future, they're able to see that it was tagged. Some of them have our phone number on it, so they're able to let us know what happened to that shark. And it's just a really great way for us to connect with fisheries and people in the industry and to find out what happened to those sharks once we release them. Another method of tagging is acoustic telemetry. And so these tags are actually internal tags. So we'll make just a very small incision and implant it into the shark and then close it up with a simple suture. They don't have any effects on the shark whatsoever. They just sit there and help us collect data, and that's not hurting the shark. And these ones actually rely on receivers being in the water. And so these ones, basically the tag that's in the shark will set off a little ping every few minutes. And when that shark swims close enough to one of these receivers, that ping is going to be picked up by the receiver. And then when we download that data, we're able to see which sharks were in the area and maybe how long they spent there based on how many pings from that acoustic tag were picked up by the transmitter. And so this is super helpful to see which different species are going in which areas they are spending time at, which habitat they're using. And so this is a map of receivers that were around Bimini. So every black dot there is a receiver. And with that, we're able to get pretty cool maps like this one. So these are just 4 different species that we get here in Bimini. And as you can see, they're all using pretty different habitats. So the great hammerheads and the bull sharks, that's the top 2 sharks there. They actually do use a lot of the same habitat, but we're able to see kind of how far they are traveling and if they are being quite condensed to one area. And then the 2 below, so we have the black tip sharks that are on the right, and they're very restricted to just a couple small areas there. But if you compare it to the lemon shark, you can see it's utilizing a lot more habitat, and this is a lot of those mangrove areas as well. And so we know why now, because they are using it as nursery areas. Another cool thing about these is that they are all released by the same company. So any acoustic tag, any acoustic receiver is going to be by the same company. And what this means is that we're able to pick up animals that we haven't put tags in, but maybe another scientist, another organization has put a tag in. But if it swims by one of our receivers, we're still able to get that information. And while this doesn't help us very much, we're able to help other organizations, but it does help us when our sharks that we've tagged are traveling very far distances where the Bimini Shark Lab hasn't put receivers in the water, but maybe someone else has. And so our sharks are being picked up on other receivers that are all around the US coast. So as we're able to see, we've got quite a broader map there. And this is just because other companies have told us that they've picked up our sharks on their receivers, which is super, super cool. It's a great collaboration between scientists. And the last method of tagging, you guys might have seen this before, especially on Shark Week. These ones get a lot of attention. They are satellite tags. So these ones will sit on the dorsal fin of sharks. And when that shark reaches, when that dorsal fin breaks the surface, it's going to chat to a satellite in the air. And so these provide us with real-time data, and they really do help us to kind of close the gaps in where these sharks are going that we don't maybe get with those acoustic receivers. And so one of the species that we'll use these for are tiger sharks. And we're pretty lucky here in Bimini. We are able to see any age range here in Bimini. So we're never sure what we're going to see, but sometimes we see baby sharks like the one in this little video here. And then we also get the ones all the way up to the big pregnant females. So pretty much any age range of tiger shark, we'll get them here at some point here in Bimini, which is pretty cool. And so this is a map of several different tiger sharks that were tagged with satellite tags. So every different color is a different individual shark. And as you can see, they're utilizing very, very different areas. So some tiger sharks like to spend a lot of time kind of hanging around one area. So if you look at maybe the orange shark there and the green shark, they're very, very different to perhaps the red shark and the blue shark and the purple shark that are traveling around very, very far distances. And so every shark is going to be different, and that's why we try to tag as many as we can to get a large sample size and see how different their behavior is and where they are traveling. And so something else that we do is we will try to put multiple tags in one shark, and there's a very good reason for that. So this is two examples of some sharks that did have an acoustic tag as well as a satellite tag. And so I'm going to let this play for you in a second, but this first shark, for example, it had a satellite tag, and they don't last as long as the acoustic tags. And so I'll let it go. And so this is the data that we got from the satellite tag. So it's moving around. That tag falls off at the start of that black line. But we know that it returned back to Bimini later on that year because the acoustic tag showed up on our receivers. So even though we lost that satellite tag, we're still able to see where that shark was going. And it was a very similar story with this one. Satellite tag is on, it falls off, shows up back on Bimini on our receivers because we'd put one of those acoustic tags in it as well. And so this is why it shows how important it is to get as much data as we can from one animal and really help us fill in those gaps as much as we can. And something else that we'll do if we've got a shark by the boat, if we have a female who we think could be pregnant, we'll actually give them an ultrasound. And so this one is a tiger shark, and you can see the little baby tiger shark in the womb there, just opening and closing its mouth, which I think is just a very, very special video. You guys are very lucky to see that. Not a lot of people will see that during their lifetime. So I'll let it play for you quickly one more time. We'll go back here. But just kind of opening, closing its mouth, gulping for air, and pushing that water over its gills there in the womb, which is super, super cool. And so another one of the species that we do get here in Bimini are, of course, the great hammerheads. And so these ones return to Bimini pretty much every single winter from November to April. Usually we have the great hammerheads here just as part of their migration. And so this is one of the species that are critically endangered. So we are quite worried about their survival long term. And so we are doing a lot of research into this species to see how we can help it. And so one of the things that we do here with the hammerheads is we can actually visually identify them because we have a lot of the same individuals returning to Bimini year after year. And so, for example, this is Gaia. And so Gaia has been returning to Bimini for, I think it's over 10 years now. So these are quite a long-lived species of shark. They can live up over 40 years old. So she's been returning to Bimini since she was a juvenile, I think. And she is over 4 meters long. So she's one of the biggest sharks that we do get here in Bimini. And so some of the ways that we identify them, some of the ways that we'll identify them are by using visual cues. So things like tag stumps. So we know that Gaia has been tagged in the past by the lab. And so she has, the tag has fallen off itself now, but we're able to see just the little stump of where it used to be. She has some very specific pigmentation. She's also got a very specific ventral pattern. So this is just the pattern that's on their belly. And this is going to be different for every single shark. So if we are able to see the belly of that shark, we're able to see exactly who we are in the water with. And so in our since about 2010, we've actually added over 60 sharks to our database of these hammerheads that have been returning to Bimini. Cool. And so we've talked a lot about the science now, but I'm going to move a little bit into the education. And so one of our mission goals, as I mentioned before, is education. So we really try as much as we can to educate future scientists. And so we do this by allowing people to design and conduct their own research projects, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And so over the years, we've hosted 24 PhD and 38 master's students. And these are people who either come to Bimini to collect their own data, or people who maybe use data that has been collected by the lab in the past, and then we'll take that and analyze it and put out a paper with the data that we've collected. We've also hosted over 1,000 international volunteers. So people like myself who come from all over the world. So I've come, all the way from Australia. And these might stay for 2 to 4 months, or maybe longer, maybe years on end. And a lot of these are thanks to our internship program. So we have usually 3 to 4 intern groups per year. And this is people who will come for roughly 2 to 4 months and learn as much as they can while they are here at the Shark Lab. And so life as an intern is going to look a little bit different for everyone, but some of the main things that people learn here are research skills, and they get freediving experience. You get a lot of experience driving boats and how to be a deckhand, species identification, which is always going to be very important, not only in the shark world, but if you are working with any animals or any plants out in the wild, how to identify them is very important. Things like underwater photography here in the beautiful clear waters. It's a great learning experience. But then also just what it's like to live and work at a remote field station. Life looks very different here than it does at home. And so just having to manage things like the salt water is always making things break. So maintenance, doing our own construction, and cooking dinner for large groups as well. We do have a lot of courses coming to stay here. So for example, last week I had to cook dinner for 30 people. So before coming to the lab, I'd never had to cook for a group that big. So everything is a learning experience. Cool. And so with our on that education, we do a lot of outreach. So today I'm talking to you guys, for example. This is what we call outreach. So just trying to reach as wide an audience as possible. And so we also host open days for the local school children, and we really try and engage the community as much as we can about the importance of marine conservation, but also just the sharks and animals that they are sharing their backyard with. But we also host courses. So we host a lot of university and college courses. We also host teacher courses. And these are people who will come for usually a week at a time, and then we'll take them out in the water and get them comfortable and show them different species of rays and sharks as well, while they are also experiencing lectures and being taught heaps about the sharks of Bimini, but also around the world and the threats facing them and how they can help them. We also present at scientific conferences. So again, this is more geared towards the scientific community, but we are able to see what other people are doing, and we're able to share the results that we have found through our research. We also engage in community events. So small things like this was a little art and science festival that we went to recently. It was super fun. We got to chat to people of all ages, so kids and parents, and just the general public and people who maybe don't know so much about sharks, or might have an idea of sharks that might not be completely accurate. So if we're just able to have a chat with them and tell them a little bit more, it does really open a lot of people's eyes and maybe change their view, which is all we want at the end of the day. And then, of course, international television. So you guys might have seen, or you guys have seen the Ocean Explorers documentary. And so this is a really, really great way to get the word out there and really educate people and show them a different side to the animals, but also the science and what we're doing to help them. So this is a really, really great way. It's very accessible to people who maybe don't live near the beach or don't have access to other ways of education. So if I've said anything that's got you guys keen on maybe wanting to be a marine biologist or work with sharks or other animals in the future, here's a few things that you guys can do just in your own time or at school. So things like doing science projects on the ocean or your favorite animal, reading books and watching movies and documentaries about them to learn as much as you can. You can participate in science summer camps, and also just follow your passion. So there are so many ways to collaborate your passion with science and conservation. So for example, if you're more into art, you could focus more on scientific illustration or getting into maybe photography or videography. But if maybe maths is more your thing, you could focus more on the data collection of science, or maybe engineering. So you guys might want to invent something new that would help scientists maybe track sharks or something like that. So there's many different ways that you can get into conservation. So really just, I think following what you love to do and what you're good at is the best way that you can help. So with that, thank you guys so much for listening. And if you've got any questions, I would love to answer them for you now. I'll stop sharing my screen and then I can see you guys much bigger. Beautiful. Does anyone have any questions? No questions.
Guys, think of 1 or 2 questions. This is your opportunity. Yeah.
So remember where you showed those 4 pictures of the sharks?
Yep.
That one picture that looked like an eel, what type of shark was that?
That's called a frilled shark. Yeah, they're not very common. They're definitely not something you'd see very often.
Also about the 4 pictures of the sharks, how can the walking shark, is it able to breathe on land, or does it have to go back into tide pools to get air?
Great question. Yeah, so they can't breathe on land, but they actually are able to stay out of water for about up to an hour. So it's not very comfortable for them, but they do have a very special adaptation where they're actually able to shut off parts of their brain. And this just means that they don't need to rely on as much oxygen. So it's not good for them, but they definitely can if the tide has gone out and they've maybe missed it. Just long enough for them to walk back into water, they are able to stay on land for quite a bit longer than most other species.
Okay. The frilled shark, which habitat will it be in?
So that one's one of our deep water species. So that's one that people won't really come across, but it lives very deep down in the ocean. So it's usually out in the that photo with it being in the blue water, that's very unnatural. That was a very crazy experience. So usually that would be in a very dark area and hunting for deep sea prey.
Okay.
I think I read this somewhere, but isn't there one species of shark that's actually vegetarian?
Oh, great question. I know which one you're talking about. So that will be the bonnethead shark. So it's actually in the hammerhead family, but it's much smaller. And its head, it almost just looks like it's almost like a shovel. It's got a very different head. And so there was a paper recently that came out. And so these sharks actually, they'll forage over seagrass. And they're usually looking for crabs and other things that hide in among the grass. And so basically it has an adaptation where it's actually developed enzymes that are able to break down that seagrass. And so it's not vegetarian. It's looking for crabs and things, but that seagrass is a byproduct of what they are eating. And so just having that adaptation, being able to break down and digest that seagrass is very interesting. And so a lot of people did think at the start that maybe that would allow them to be vegetarian, but it's not exactly the case. It's just that it's a byproduct of the crabs and other things that they are looking for.
Anybody else? Anybody new? I know only this table is asking questions. Okay, I'll ask one question before others can think.
Okay.
Is it true that if the sharks are turned upside down, they get disoriented?
Yes. Yeah, so that's called tonic immobility. And so not all sharks do it, and we're actually not exactly sure why this has been adapted. But yeah, so a lot of the species that we work with, if you do kind of flip it onto their belly, they go into almost like a trance-like state. So they just get a lot more calmer. And this is very handy for us when we are working with them. We can just turn them on their backs and they get a lot more calm. Just means that their tail's not crashing around and we're able to work with them a lot easier. So they do kind of wake up from it a little bit if you leave them in there too long. But yeah, they are just a little bit disoriented. They're not quite sure what's going on. So we think maybe this evolved to help them with mating. But yeah, we're actually not quite sure the specific reason for this adaptation.
Okay, anybody new? Any other questions? Do you have any questions about how she lives in an island? You've been living there for a year, right, Emily?
Yeah, almost a year now. Yeah, so I did go home for a little bit, but yeah, mostly just over a year.
So how's your non-work life?
It is lots of fun. So it's living on Bimini is very, very interesting. It's super tiny, so there's not a lot to do, but we're very lucky that we can go snorkeling all the time and we can take the boats out and go fishing and things like that as well. We also have Egg, who I showed you guys as well. So we're looking after a dog, which makes it very homely. But yeah, it's just a beautiful place. It's lots of sand and palm trees. It's very, very warm. So I do often struggle. I have to put lots and lots of sunscreen on every day. But yeah, it's super, super nice. It's very, very quiet. But I do miss some of the luxuries of the regular life. So when we do go back to Florida, every now and then, it's nice to just get different sorts of food and things like that as well.
Okay. I also have your donation page. I have your donation page, like I just want to show this. You might want to talk quickly about the shark adoption.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. So we do have the option to adopt a shark. And so we have a few different levels here. Some of the ones that you can track, they are a lot more money because those tags are quite expensive. But if you guys did want to adopt a shark, then one of the ones that we will catch in the future or one that we've caught in the past, you can actually choose a name for that shark and we'll send you a photo and maybe the dart tag or the external tag that we put in that shark. And it's a donation to the lab. So you guys would be funding research and conservation efforts for a lot of these shark species.
Ben has a question.
How many types of filter feeder sharks are there?
Oh, great question. So there's 3 that we know of. So we have the whale shark, which is the biggest fish in the ocean, the biggest shark. And then the second biggest is the basking shark. So these ones are found in a lot colder places. And there's also the third one, which was very recently discovered. It was only in the 70s that we discovered this shark, but it is the megamouth shark. And this one again is very, very big. It's the 3rd biggest fish in the ocean. But we don't know very much about it because it is again one of those super deep sea species. So we really it's quite elusive and we don't get a lot of data from it. But yeah, there's 3 that we know of.
Okay, last few questions, guys. Tom?
Why is the goblin shark like pale?
Pale? Oh, that will be because do you remember before I mentioned that sharks can be very different colors and some sharks tan? So the goblin shark, because they are such a deep sea species, they're not getting near the sun at all, so they don't have that ability to tan. So that's why they are pale. So maybe if you go to maybe like South Australia, or if you go to Antarctica or you go to Norway or somewhere super, super cold where you're not seeing the sun very often, you're probably going to end up quite pale as well. And so that's why the goblin sharks are.
I saw one somewhere that there was this fish that was like would almost ride on the shark's back. Do they only do that for some sharks or like all sharks? I think.
Yeah, so that's probably remora that you're thinking of, and so they will do this for sharks as well as many other fish. So if there's you probably wouldn't see them on, for example, the wobbegong or epaulet shark or things like that. They're probably going to be more on those migratory species, but we see them a lot here in Bimini, and they're on all different species of sharks. But they're also on other large fish as well. So we get lots of species of big jacks here, and then they'll also hang out on tuna. So many other species as well, but just to get a free ride and an easy meal off them.
Let's give Miss Emily a round of applause.
I've just lost your camera there. I'm not sure if that was intentional.
Yeah, that's intentional.
Okay, amazing. Beautiful. Well, thank you guys so much for all your awesome questions and being so attentive.
Thank you. And we'll definitely keep you up to date on the 2 innovation projects that they are going to do. Like I said, they're going to work on ocean acidification and coral habitat.
Yeah.
If you just indulge me for one last thing, do you guys have any corals nearby Bimini?
We do. So yeah, we do have, it's mostly seagrass habitat, but we do have some coral reefs here as well. It's definitely not my area of expertise. So I don't know the specific species. I do know we have some fire coral and things just to keep clear of it. But yeah, we do have quite a few different species of coral. It's actually very interesting. There's a shipwreck here in Bimini. And so because we do have a shipwreck, we have very different species of coral on either side of that shipwreck. So we have one side that gets a lot of sun, and so we have kind of a different kinds of coral on one side, and then on the other side that's more shaded and a lot more cool. We actually get a lot of corals grow on that side that are usually much deeper in the water, but because they are constantly shaded and kept cool from that shipwreck, we're actually able to get them in a much shallower area. So yeah, we definitely do have lots of coral. It's quite interesting here.
Thank you so much, guys. One more time.
Of course, thank you guys. It was great to talk to you. Thank you. Cool. I'm keen to see what you come up with.
Bye.
Okay, bye.